Howdy, y'all.
That's how we say hello in South Texas. We are Susan and Mark Geltner from San Antonio, Texas. We've been involved with family enrichment for 10 years. We have 7 children. We are so honored to be able to introduce Art&Laraine today. One thing I did want to share that's really helped us from the family enrichment courses and learning more about the temperaments is a situation with one of my daughters. We have 6 daughters and 1 son. And I have one daughter that we have the same temperament. So if you know much about temperaments, it can be a little bit challenging, especially for my husband, who helps us. But when we first started getting involved in family enrichment and doing more, sometimes she would say, why do they call this family enrichment? Because you're spending so much time away from the family. And would kind of sometimes question what we were doing. And so we would tell her and all of our kids that this is to help us be better spouses and better parents, and it was really important. And then we learned about temperaments and how to explain things better, and I just have to tell you, to give you hope for those of you who have young children that might be hearing these same things. Our daughter came to us this summer and said, Mom and Dad, we're so grateful for family enrichment. And we're so grateful that we notice the difference in the way you communicate as spouses, and it helps them to feel more loved. So we're very grateful to family enrichment and hope that you all have similar experiences.
Well, the courses of family enrichment have helped us to grow, to be better parents to our kids, a better husband to my wife, and to friends and others who work together to improve and enrich family life, one couple at a time. And we're still learning as we go through different courses. The background and experiences from the various couples in the courses that we participate in continue to expand and encourage our joy and appreciation of family life. It's what a beautiful celebration of the family. And I must say, the synergy that we felt in this room yesterday, and I anticipate this morning, has been off the charts. It's been really amazing. So we're real excited to be able to participate in this conference. It's been beautiful to see so many people celebrating family life. You know, one of the core principles of family enrichment is to improve communication with our spouse, communication with our children, and it's to help to learn others' perspectives into the same set of facts. We first learned about the temperaments through family enrichment, and what a great tool it's been to help us to learn how to communicate and understand the other person. People with different temperaments may see the identical set of facts totally differently. Is the glass half full, or is the glass half empty? And it may depend upon your temperament that makes that determination. Understanding our own temperament helps us to get to know ourselves better and therefore improve ourselves. But it also has a great bearing on our relationships with our spouse and our children. When we understand the way that our spouse is acting in response to a certain set of events, and it's part of their inherent temperament and not an intentional act to try to annoy us, then it helps us to understand better how we should react and respond. And it's especially helped us understand to get to know our children better. In our household, we have 9 people. We have 3 phlegmatics, 2 melancholics, 2 sanguine, and 2 choleric, and a partridge in a pear tree. But it really, there's a lot of different temperaments. And knowing the temperaments helps us to understand each other. The classic 4 temperaments were originally proposed by Hippocrates, but Art and Laraine Bennett have brought the temperaments to life in the books that they've written and the talks they've given with clear, practical, and concise examples of the temperaments in marriage and family life. Art is a family therapist and has counseled couples for over 25 years. He's the president and CEO of Catholic Charities in Arlington, Virginia. And Laraine has a master's degree in philosophy and is the editor and communications manager of the National Council of Catholic Women. We discovered their book, The Temperament God Gave Your Spouse, through family enrichment. It's one of the gems of family enrichment in the technical cases, the bibliography at the back, and it referred us to their book. And so Susan and I sat down and read that book together, page by page. talking about it, and it was actually
It was
hilarious.
hilarious.
It was very funny. So because as they go through the examples, Susan will read it and see, that's you, that's exactly what you do. And then I read it, no, that's you, that's what you do. So
We were
very
laughing
enlightening.
so hard. It was really fun.
It was a great experience. So the precision with which the temperaments pinpointed and anticipated how our temperament will react to a certain set of facts was very insightful. We never met the Bennetts before, but they already knew us through knowing our temperaments. It was really amazing. So it's highly entertaining, uplifting, and insightful. I highly encourage all of you to read their books. They're really enlightening. Together, Art and Laraine have co-authored 4 books, The Temperament God Gave You, The Temperament God Gave Your Spouse, The Temperament God Gave Your Kids, The Emotion God Gave You and Tuned In, The Power of Pressing Pause and Listening. And Laraine has also written a book, A Year of Grace, 365 Reflections for Caregivers. Art and Laraine have been married for 42 years. They're proud parents of 4 children, 1 of each temperament, I might add. And they actually have 5 grandchildren, 2 of which just arrived in the past 10 days. So it's wonderful that they're here for us today. So they live near Arlington, Virginia, near our nation's capital in Washington, D.C. So please join us in welcoming Art and Laraine Bennett.
Thank you so much. Thank you. That was wonderful. Thank you.
Very much, Mary.
Thank you so much.
Susan. Thank you so much.
First, we're going to give away 2 books to the winners of this contest. Okay. So the first book goes to the couple who is most recently married. So
is anybody on their honeymoon?
no, he's joking.
If you are, you keep that to yourself and talk to me later, okay? So who's gotten most recent marriage? Is that what we're looking for?
Yeah.
Who's gotten married in the last 3 months?
Any hands up? I see hands.
Right there, back there.
All right.
Anyone out? You?
We've been on our honeymoon for the past 25 years.
Oh, okay. No, I've been on honeymoon for 25 years. That's a good move. But it does not count, but it's a good move.
Okay, so who was the one that's last 3 months? Where is she? He. Come on over. Congratulations.
Okay, our next, we want to give a book away to people who have the most kids. Does anybody in this room have more than 2 children? Raise your hand. All right, that's right. This is the Catholic group, right? Okay.
No,
good.
not
okay.
necessarily.
No, okay. Anybody have more than 8 kids? Wow.
Ooh.
All right.
How about more than? Woo! Awesome.
All right, let's see if anybody gets a double figures. Anybody more than 10? Wow.
Woo!
Is that it? Anybody else over than 10?
More. Just one.
How many? 11.
Woo! Okay.
That's it.
Is there anybody with more? That's him.
That's it. All right, very good. 11.
Let's go.
All right, very good. Well, thank you very much. If I wait for Laraine to stop talking, we'll never start.
Sorry.
Laraine and I are very grateful. Actually, we're honored to be here in London for the 20th World Congress of Family Enrichment. And I guess we all have in common, we're all striving to make our families the best they can be. And it seems appropriate to start with a quote by Pope Francis, who's written on this quite a bit in The Joy of Love, Amoris Laetitia. Here's what he says. The Lord's presence dwells in real and concrete families, with all their daily troubles and struggles, with their hopes and joys. The spirituality of family love is made up of thousands of small but real gestures. In that variety of gifts and encounters which deepen communion, God has his dwelling place. So it's good to know that God comes into our families, and then more so when we acknowledge each other's gifts, when the family is a community of acknowledging the different gifts that we get, but also to create encounters, real talking, real listening, not just the transactions that tend to dominate life so often in the busy cultures we're all from, where you can just be kind of strangers passing by, but having encounters. And then perhaps most important, a deep communion. Growing up in a family where there's a communion and community that strengthens them when they become adults and do the same. So why did God create us? God created us for love. We're built for love, and love is our primary vocation, no matter what other vocations we have. And the family is probably the most important place where that vocation is learned, practiced, and lived out. St. John Paul II called it the domestic church, the family. So it's wonderful to be able to talk to you all about temperaments and the families. So we're hoping that you'll acknowledge the gifts of your kids, your spouse, and yourself, and at the same time, while acknowledging those gifts, understand that there's more growing to do, more virtues to be acquired, more character to be developed. So Pope Francis calls them a variety of gifts. I guess we call them the temperaments. I think it's the same thing, the things that God gave each of us to share. And we want those to shine forth in our family. And your kids will not be just like you, nor like your spouse. But you want to kind of create that space in your family where you admire gifts, even with the ones that you don't have. So the temperaments are a great tool for self-knowledge and also for communication. And it doesn't put you in a box. We're not putting you in a box, okay? You're free to react however you want. However, it's a good tool for your toolbox, and you can make a judgment if you think it's going to be helpful. Now, it doesn't matter what we think. Many have thought that the product of original sin is isolation, me against the world. No one understands me, and then dominance and all sorts of things take over instead of love. So the temperaments are, in their modest way, trying to give us all tools to be more loving. Now, what is temperament? Yeah. Temperament is not your whole personality. It is really how we tend to react. So in certain situations, we're going to lean towards a certain type of response. It's sort of how we're hardwired. This hardwired aspect does sometimes build more empathy and understanding. Is he or she doing what she's doing to drive me nuts? To torment me?
Yeah.
Or is that kind of how they're hardwired?
Yeah.
All right. Temperament is not the whole of our personality either. Our personality, gosh, it would be our culture, our environment, what we've learned, birth order, the decisions we've made, the repercussions to our decisions. But temperaments are really just how we tend to react and tend to respond, and we're not determined by that. What are the kind of things we're looking for with temperament? Do you respond quickly or slowly? Are you intense in your reactions? Or are you more relaxed in your reactions? How long your reaction is sustained? Are you one of those where you have a reaction and it's going to last a week? Or is it kind of more flighty? You have a reaction, it's strong or whatever, and then you go on to the next thing. Psychologists like Kagan at Harvard and others who study this, they talk about sociability, reactivity, how far we react, persistence of response, and impulsivity. But like Mark and Susan said, we're going to talk about the temperaments in the old-fashioned terms, but covering the same thing, the ones that Hippocrates came up with, which are choleric, phlegmatic, sanguine, and melancholic. Understanding temperaments gives us an insight. What are our strengths? Just kind of scan your family. All 11 and 13 of you, I guess, over here. Just scan the 13 and go, what are the strengths? What are the obvious strengths? What are some of the challenges that are there? And it makes, as a parent, and as a spouse, and as a person just trying to grow, it gives you a kind of good idea of kind of where things are easier, but also where some challenges might be. These are not necessarily moral challenges. These aren't moral evaluations, just strengths and weaknesses in terms of kind of navigating through life. And then the goal is to acquire virtues, to round you out. Nobody wants to be parked and stop with their own temperament, but wants to acquire virtues to be able to grow. And you'll see in our book, The Temperament God Gave Your Kids. You can take a look at that. We have a lot of kind of suggestions on how to help kids kind of flower by acknowledging their temperament. So anyhow, as parents, we want to grow in self-knowledge, and you always have a spouse to remind you if you're not keeping up with that. become more understanding and more forgiving of ourselves, our spouse, and our kids. So the goal of having a lovely family. So speaking of lovely, I'd like to introduce my wife, Laraine Bennett. She's going to talk about the first temperament, the choleric temperament.
Well, I always have to begin with the confession. So my confession is that before I knew about temperament, I used to think that my husband, Art, was just like me, only bad. But then I learned about the temperaments, and I discovered that some of those peculiar characteristics that he had were not things that he was doing on purpose to annoy and harass me. So it was actually part of his God-given temperament. So for example, if he didn't answer a question right away, it wasn't because he was mad at me. Before, these things would provoke arguments. So for example, when we were first married and he'd come home and I was stuck at home with the kids, the little one, you know, the babies or something, and he'd come home like, look, what are we gonna do today? You know, we gotta do something tonight. I've been home all day. How about, oh, I know, let's do a picnic. How about a picnic? No, wait. How about, maybe we could go to a movie. Do we know any babysitters? No, wait. Oh, let's go out. Let's just go out to dinner. Why are you not answering me? What, are you mad at me? Oh, you don't want to do anything? What are you, antisocial or something? I mean, but then I realized that, no, I needed to give him a little space. He needed time to respond. So I learned that that was part of his temperament, and it no longer prompted these fights. So we're going to do this brief overview of the four temperaments, and also, most people are a combination of two, and you generally have like a primary temperament and a secondary. And if you want to find out what your temperament is, you can either buy our book, The Temperament God Gave You, or you could go online and you could take the temperament quiz at temperamentquiz.com, and you will find out what you are. Okay. So the choleric, or choleric as some people say, is your original type A personality. They have quick, intense, and long-lived reactions, which makes them decisive, tenacious, and driven to follow through. They're determined, energetic, forceful, and confident. Now, what you want to know about cholerics is that they love to be in charge, and they don't need to have any actual experience in the areas in which they decide to take charge. But that does not undermine their confidence a bit, okay? So we can all think of a certain American president who fits this description. Okay, so our youngest child turned out to be a choleric like me. And so here's an example. She had zero talent in terms of acting or singing or whatever, but that didn't stop her from trying out every single year for the high school musical. So cholerics are fiercely independent, self-motivated, and strong-willed. They're sometimes accused of rolling over people once they've set a plan in motion. They're stubborn and demanding. They're opinionated and competitive, and they're argumentative. Now, those of you out there who are cholerics, you will say, why, thank you for the compliment. To illustrate this point, so our youngest child, Lucy, who, by the way, she has given us permission to use her name. She's the only one who has, in fact, she demands it. She was helping us develop the temperament test that's in the kid book. She was trying it out. So I had the strengths and weaknesses listed for each temperament. She's looking at the choleric strengths and weaknesses, and she goes, you know, Mom, one thing I don't understand, why is always right listed as a weakness? Because if you're a choleric, you are always right. Now, cholerics are the ones who are always, if you have you have a choleric child, because they're the ones who are always arguing and debating whatever you say. So they can be diverted into an argument at the drop of a hat. And again, they don't need to know anything about what they're arguing about in order to argue. So we like to point out St. Paul, who was himself a choleric. In Athens, Paul grows exasperated by all the idols. Quote, "So he debated in the synagogue with the Jews and the worshipers, and daily in the public square, with whoever happened to be there." Paul even disagreed openly with Peter, the first pope. Quote, "I opposed him to his face because he clearly was wrong." In Acts, it says about Paul that, quote, "He even addressed the Greek-speaking Jews and debated with them. They, for their part, responded by trying to kill him." Cholerics sometimes provoke that kind of response. So we like to say, try not to take it too personally when cholerics, young and old, want to argue or debate. And bear in mind, they typically don't like any idea unless it's their own. And parents often become annoyed with them because they're overly argumentative. But what we say is try to look at it as the way they process information. They process it by arguing and debating, whether in their mind or verbally. But we say as long as you remain respectful, that's the key. So remind your young choleric that they can argue and debate. In fact, they'll be your future lawyers. So this is a good thing. But they need to be respectful. So also we recommend keeping young cholerics busy. Put them in charge of something. They like to be in charge. The tip in our book, it would be to not engage in power struggles with cholerics, because they will just wear you out. You send them to timeout and they'll like, fine, I'll stay here. I'm not admitting I was wrong. But cholerics, even the most stubborn, can be won over by good reasons, rational arguments, acknowledging their contributions, and appealing to supernatural motives. If you're married to a choleric, keep in mind that they do need acknowledgement for their successes and appreciation for their hard work. And well, just tell them all the time, "You're right about that, honey. You were always right." Being respectful, as I said, is a key attribute to encourage. And even when we don't agree with what our spouse or our child is saying, we don't have to agree with them to listen attentively and respectfully and to foster a culture of appreciation for both ideas and feelings in your family. So, for example, one year, out of the blue, Art came home and he goes, "You know what? I have this amazing idea. I want to do one of those adventures where you get dropped by a helicopter on a mountaintop and you navigate your way back to civilization, just navigating by the stars." And I said, the supportive wife that I am, "That's the stupidest idea you have ever come up with." Now, if you knew Art, you would know that I was right. This is very true. However, the mistake was that at that point, I shut down all further conversation. So a key communication tip for cholerics is to try to remain open to influence. And that is a virtue that requires the virtue of humility. So be open to influence. And the way you would do that, instead of saying, "That's the stupidest idea I've ever heard," you would say, or I should have said, "Wow, that's interesting. Tell me more about that idea. I mean, tell me, was this a dream you always had? I'd like to hear more about why you want to do that." And then that would have opened up the conversation instead of shutting it down. Happy families are those where each member feels supported in sharing their dreams. And having that trust that we can reveal our hopes and dreams without being scoffed at or shut down makes for a very happy family. Virtues to teach our young cholerics: humility, patience, empathy, and obedience. And it's tricky because whatever the virtues that are going to be the most difficult for each temperament are going to, it's the opposite of their natural strength. So, for example, the natural strength of the choleric child is going to be their magnanimity, their leadership, their take charge and zeal. But these natural strengths need to be channeled as your cholerics are growing up. Learn to channel them. And teach empathy. That's a key virtue to teach for young cholerics. So one of the ways you can help develop that sensitivity is we would have to say to our choleric, we would say, you know, maybe you should let your friend choose the game sometime, you know, that you're going to play. Or how do you think Emily feels when you only invite her over to clean your room? That's a true story. Yeah. Again, their natural gifts of magnanimity, leadership, confidence, and zeal, once channeled in the right direction, can be great gifts to the family, the community, and the world. Now, Art will speak about the exact opposite temperament.
You know, we've been doing this for about 15 years. And it's funny, we always start with the choleric temperament. And just so you know, if you're wondering, it goes longer than the other ones. It's just such a beautiful temperament, right, Lorraine? So we got the cholerics out of the way. That's the way it has to work. No, that's good. Lorraine is choleric, and I'm going to talk to you about the next temperament, which is the phlegmatic. Oftentimes about a phlegmatic, and it's good to think about the phlegmatic about 180 degrees differently in terms of reacting than the choleric, okay? Often you hear about a phlegmatic, what a great guy, team player, doesn't worry about himself, makes sacrifices to get the organization, the group, the family, in harmony. And so generally easygoing and popular. And by the way, I'm a phlegmatic, just to let you know. Not always humble, no, but anyhow. So where the choleric fires away kind of quickly and intensely, the phlegmatic, it tends to respond more slowly and deliberately. Like Lorraine told about the story, when I come home, I'm not dying to talk right away. Just give me 15, 20 minutes and I'm all ready to go, but not right away. That was the only source of that difficulty. Phlegmatics tend to be more calm and even-keeled, all things being equal. Even in the middle of conflict, sometimes they can kind of find that space of being, okay, let's just figure out what we need to do here. Let's just kind of take this slowly. Phlegmatics are dependable overall, polite, and even-tempered. Temperament, even-tempered. As children, they're quite docile and obedient. So we always say to families, if you haven't had a phlegmatic kid yet, keep going until you get at least one. Because as a parent, you want to do this, and the only one following you will be your phlegmatic. But we need one of those in every family, yeah. Also, if you have a phlegmatic, your first kid's a phlegmatic, say, this is easy, this parenting thing, no big deal. Wait a second. God may not give you another phlegmatic. It doesn't always work that way. No, because the key to a phlegmatic is a peacemaker. Mom and dad wants us to go, we go. There's too much stress, I'll say something nice and polite. I'll do the dishes so you don't get upset, that kind of thing. It's a natural tendency of the phlegmatic, which is to avoid conflict. Because, and this is the weak spot of the phlegmatic, they have a distaste, and sometimes will run away from conflict, particularly interpersonal conflict. So it's a strength, weakness. They bring peace, but sometimes you don't need peace right now. Or to get to peace, this is what I think most phlegmatic, particularly kids, have to learn. You want peace? We all want peace. To get to peace usually takes going through a conflict, and not avoiding conflict, which is a temptation, perhaps, for the phlegmatic. Sometimes the phlegmatics will even take the blame. Let me see, if we're arguing right now, if I just say it's my fault, will the argument end? It's my fault, the argument ends. But that actually is a short-term solution. It's not really a solution. So one of the things you have to always help with your phlegmatic kids, and sometimes you can kind of neglect them because they're not causing that much trouble. You know, they're the kid in the back of the class that's not throwing anything at anybody. And the teachers can kind of say, I got to work with the heavy maintenance kids. So as a parent, you want to watch out, particularly if you have a large family and you're really busy, that you're not neglecting the phlegmatic's needs. They will not sound the alarm. They will not be the squeaky wheel, but they have needs that you want to help them with. Let me tell you a story I had. I was working as a therapist in the in the DC area, and a person came in who was a hard-driving, successful choleric. You know, I mean, he was on top of the world, very successful, doing great, had a large family, but his oldest son wasn't following in step. And he was really nervous about that because he basically was thinking like this: I got a plan, I got a model, look at me, it's working great. I try to hand this on to my son, and he's not interested. What does he do on weekends? He just likes to read and just stay to himself, and he doesn't go to the parties, he doesn't join the sports teams and stuff. I mean, I'm really worried because he had one model, a great model, one model of success. And he came to talk to me to get consultation as a family therapist because he said, I got to get my kid on fire about this. He's got to be, in effect, like me. Because it's great being like me, right? Why would anyone not be like me? That kind of thing. Huh? This is a very common thing, actually, and it's interesting. So when I said to him, I said, so you're worried that he doesn't appreciate your gifts. He goes, exactly. What? I don't understand that. And I said, it might start with the fact that you don't appreciate his gifts. He's an introverted kid, artistic sensibilities. He's reflective, a little bit quiet. Maybe if you acknowledged his gifts, he might acknowledge your gifts. And there's a couple things there to kind of take from that. Is one, it's the parent's job to initiate all this. Appreciation of the gifts of your children. And then also, it puts you in more of a situation to appreciate theirs. And you want to appreciate things even if it's not just like you. And I don't want to minimize how difficult that is. We all kind of like ourselves, you know what I mean? You know, we're kind of, yeah, right, but okay. And we're working hard, and we do learn great things in our lives we want to pass on to our kids. But a lot of times, rather than oppressing them with them or pushing them with them, it's acknowledging their gifts and becoming a family where all gifts are acknowledged overtly, primarily from the parents. Now, the choleric likes to stir things up. That's well documented by Laraine. When we first meet a couple, she used to, there's two topics her favorite: religion and politics. That's how she likes to start. And I go under the table until it's done, and hoping it won't happen anymore. No, nothing. As a phlegmatic comes into a situation, wants to fit in. How do I fit in? I'm not trying to take over. Oh, I can help with this, I can help with that, you know, that kind of thing. The choleric comes into the situation usually wants a coup d'etat of some form coming. They want to kind of take over. But now I want to give you a story of an example where I was meeting this person. He's a high-powered person, worked for Catholic Charities, got to meet with different donors, and he would go to a Starbucks, a coffee shop, and have half-hour meetings, 7 to 7:30, 7:30 to 8, 8 to 8:30. So I got one of the slots. And so I had my half hour with him and whatever. So we're sitting there talking. It's outside. It's a nice day in Virginia. We have a few of those. And you know, the sun's kind of in my eyes. So I'm talking to him, and I'm kind of going, and he goes, "Was the sun in your eyes?" I go, "Yeah, but it's no big deal. I mean, you know, the clock is ticking. I'm phlegmatic. No big deal. No big deal." Okay, so he goes, "Okay." He says, "No, this is bothering you." So he gets up. He picks up the Starbucks umbrella, which has got a big cement thing on it. Okay. No, that's not good enough. Okay, wait a second. Okay, now we can talk. And I'm going, yeah, we can talk. So I told that story to Laraine. I go, I'm sitting there going like this with no problem. He's sitting there seeing that, and that's a problem. He's got to fix it right now. So the phlegmatic kind of rolls with the punches and isn't that obsessed sometimes with re-engineering what's going on. What's the hand I'm dealt? Let me play the hand I'm dealt. Sometimes it's tempted to nag phlegmatics. They're not picking it up quick enough. They're not reacting strong enough or intensely enough. But generally, we discourage that because just like the choleric is the most self-confident temperament, the phlegmatic is the least confident. So if you kind of nag them, you're kind of pushing them, particularly with kids, you're pushing their self-confidence lower, and that's really not so helpful. There are some virtues that come easily to phlegmatics, and one of them is humility, which if you have to pick a virtue, that's a great virtue to have. So that humility, docility, and patience, those are great virtues. And I would say if you have a phlegmatic kid, you thank them for that. While you're about to intervene with the kid as being too noisy or difficult, you might come up to the phlegmatic and say, you know, I really appreciate we can sit in the front row of church and how you're so attentive. So they're not forgotten for those skills they bring. But they need to develop new skills. And a lot of times as parents, you're doing two things all the time: reinforcing the strengths, figuring out how to go after the weaknesses. The weaknesses you want to kind of work with help them be more courageous. Whenever phlegmatic leans into a conflict or makes a point, maybe you're having a debate and they make a small point, you go, you know what? Let's think about that. That's a good point. You want to reinforce that sense of interpersonal conflict is not the end of the world. Also, leadership. You kind of find situations where they can lead. You may have to kind of stand behind them more than another kid. And then what we call holy audacity. You know, the kind of thing you want is a person who has good values and comes from a strong family to be able to tell the world about how to live in certain situations. Give you an example about having the courage of phlegmatic. Our son, who is phlegmatic and does not let us give us his name. He'd probably be horrified of this, but one thing Laraine and I can always count on, our kids never listen to our talks. So anyhow, so our son came home, and because he was phlegmatic, he came home with the school newspaper, and he handed it to us.
When he was in high school.
When he was in high school. The other kids just got it and tossed it because they're not phlegmatic. So he brought it home, and he gave it to us. So we took a look at it. So wait, hold on a second. When we said, hold on a second, he held on a second. He stopped, and he looked. He said, look at it. It says that they have student body elections coming up. They have a president of the school for those kids. And we were looking at it. We said, we think you should apply. We think you're qualified. What do you think? He goes, you want me to apply? Yeah, we want you to apply. He said, okay, I'll apply. That's why I say you got to have one or two of these. And then he ran, and he won. Great day for the choleric, and even the phlegmatic dad is going, all right. So what happened then? What happened then? He was right in the middle of a maelstrom for the next 8 or 9 months, because every time he made a decision, some people liked it, and some people didn't. There was no escaping conflict. He put himself right in the middle of it. And that was great because it was just a high school thing, so we were there to coach him. You can imagine Laraine choleric coaching, right? But he needed that. He needed that coaching and stuff, and it turned out to be a great thing, a great experience for him, and helped him grow up a lot. Now, one of the communication tips for the phlegmatic is to encourage them to speak up. Encourage them to speak up. Oh, the coach never plays me, or this teacher's giving me a raw deal. Okay, let's go talk to the teacher. Let's go talk to the coach. They will immediately say, no, I don't want to do that, because it's interpersonal conflict. Say, I think we can do it. Let's rehearse it right now. Just mention to him, I go to all the practices, that kind of thing. You coach them up. Mm-hmm. Now, maybe you didn't have to be coached up to that. This is when you know you're in the land of temperament. Something easy for you, you're going to bring that gift gently and quietly to your kid because they need your help for that. Laraine gave a saint. Lorraine's great at grading saints. Somebody asked me yesterday, how come you didn't give a phlegmatic saint? Well, I'll give a phlegmatic saint right now. St. Thomas Aquinas, you ever read his debates and dialogues? He was apparently famous not only for winning them, but more famous, or as famous, for going to the other side and said, your arguments could be stronger if you said this, this, and this. Yeah. I, St. Thomas Aquinas, will still defeat you because I represent the truth and all that, but you can make a stronger argument. So he would coach the other side, so it could be a more even battle. You know what I mean? That kind of thing. So that's a great phlegmatic saint. All right, so now Lorraine's going to talk about the next temperament, the sanguine.
Well, cholerics always like to say that if phlegmatics were ruling the world, we'd still be living in caves. They'd be like, this cave is just fine. I like this cave. Some nice cave paintings on the wall. Yeah. Anyway. So the sanguine is your classic people person. They're the life of the party, fun-loving, and affectionate. They're eager to please, and they love to be the center of attention. They have quick, intense, but short-lived reactions. So as a result, they live in the present moment. They're talkative, they're optimistic and enthusiastic, but forgetful. So they tend to arrive late. They forget their car keys, and even where they parked the car, but they always have a funny story about why they're late, so you forgive them. They're just adorable, I mean, right? So I'm part sanguine too, so just FYI.
Oh, brother.
Yeah, so you have a sanguine child because A, they're always talking, and B, they always forget things. So they run out of the house, they're going to school, they forgot their homework, so they have to come back and get that. Then they realize, they forgot their sports equipment, so they have to run back in and get that. And this doesn't necessarily mean they're being bad or that they are ADHD. It's a part of the temperament. It's something that is within the norms for that temperament. They're sociable, spontaneous, and scattered, easily distracted. They're like butterflies that flit from flower to flower, from one interest to another. So in school, like in high school, they join a lot of clubs. We have clubs in high school in America. You probably have clubs too. So our sanguine son, so we have one of each. The sanguine son, when he was in high school, he decided to sign up for a whole bunch of clubs. And then he never attended any of the meetings. But he showed up on picture day. And so at the end of the year, I'm looking at the yearbook and I see him in all these pictures. I'm like, you don't play chess. Why are you in the chess club? I know you don't play the violin. I know. What the, yearbook club? Yeah, anyway, but there he was. So another story about our sanguine son, whose name shall never be mentioned because he actually would hate that. So he came home from high school one day. He put the interim grades. I don't know if you have interim grades in Europe as well, but anyway, so this was like not the final grade for the semester, but the interim. So he posted it on the fridge. And usually when people post things on the fridge, that means they did something excellent. They were it was really superior grades, right? Well, not his. No, his were barely passing. However, for Mom, he crossed out the barely passing grades and he raised them. And so the C's became B's. The B minus became a B plus, and then he recalculated the grade point average also. And so I come home and I go, what is this? This is terrible. Your grades are awful. You're never going to be able to get into college. And he goes, don't worry about it, Mom. Oh, I got this under control. Don't worry. These are just the interim grades. I mean, I've done a lot of work since. And you know what? All I have to do is go talk to my teachers. I'll go talk to them and they will fix it for me. Don't you worry. But notice, he never said that he was going to study harder. A sanguine relies on his charismatic personality. However, you might have a sanguine who's like this. In high school, they go to all the parties, He was on the football team, so he was, he excelled in sociability. However, the thing is that sanguines eventually can grow. They should and they can grow in virtue. So he learned to buckle down, and he grew in the virtue of perseverance and self-control, and he's actually now studying for his doctorate in philosophy. So this has a happy ending. There's always hope. St. Peter, we like to say St. Peter was a lovable but inconstant sanguine. Quote, "Lord, I am prepared to go to prison and die with you," he said. A few hours later, he denies knowing Jesus. At the Transfiguration, Peter enthusiastically offers to set up 3 tents on the spot, even though, as Scripture notes, he did not know what he was saying. When Christ appears walking on the water, Peter impulsively joins him until he begins to sink. Now, interestingly, it was to St. Peter that Christ said, "Put out into the deep." And so that is a virtue that we want to encourage in our young sanguines. They need to be encouraged to go deeper, to learn when to stop talking and to listen, when to put aside all their activities, when to buckle down and really persevere with a project. So virtues that come naturally to sanguines are forgiveness, joy, generosity. Virtues that might be worth striving for include perseverance, self-control, and striving for a deep intellectual and spiritual life. They need to be acknowledged also. And the tendency that they have is to always have the rose-colored glasses on, right? Or at least melancholics think that they are overly, optimistic. So, but what they they can sometimes get into conflict with melancholics especially, for wanting everything to be happy. Everything is fine, don't worry about it. It's just good, just chill out. In fact, Pablo said that yesterday. It's so classic. He goes, I just tell my wife to chill out. And I'm like, that's what our sanguine says, chill, just chill. Why don't you just chill? You know, it's a classic sanguine move. Anyway, so we want to be able to encourage our sanguine to listen and try to understand the other person's perspective. And the melancholic is saying, look, this is a serious situation. So we want the sanguine to understand that sometimes you can't just tell them to chill out. You want to listen to them. Okay, but with their joy and their enthusiasm, generosity and love for people, sanguines can become the most charismatic leaders in their families and in their communities and in the world.
I'm up?
Yep.
Great.
Sorry. Art. Ta-da.
Thank you, Lorraine.
Wait, I forgot.
That's more like it.
How many people are sanguines? Raise your hand. Oh, you're supposed to be, me. Okay, there you go.
Notice the sanguines get the seats in the front too. You notice that? Okay. I want to be part of this. This is going to be fun.
Yeah.
We always appreciate sanguines sitting in the front. We can't see the back sometimes. So the melancholic is the opposite. The most extroverted temperament is the sanguine. And extroversion, introversion means, it doesn't mean always quiet or not quiet. It means you kind of see life, you gaze at the world. That's a sanguine. All the wonderful, the music, the movies, the people, the ideas. Oh, what a wonderful world it is. The melancholic is kind of 180 on that. They kind of start their day or start their experience kind of going inside. How did I end up here? What am I doing here? It's good to be here. How do I feel? What's going on? Why aren't they talking to me? Why are they talking to me? Whatever. I mean, so it's kind of like right out of the gate. It's a different dynamic, and it's more. Whereas the sanguine, it tends to be more outgoing, more optimistic, more enthusiastic. And we want to be clear, those are wonderful virtues.
Yes.
You can't have too much of that. It can be somewhat ill-placed, but you need it. The melancholic, it tends to be a little more cautious. Some people say pessimistic. We melancholics say realistic. All right? And more serious. That there's serious business going on here. We got to address. There's something important going on here. Can we talk about that kind of thing? Seems to be the burden of the melancholic. The sanguine reacts quickly. An event happens, pretty much an immediate response. All right, and that's really important. Melancholic, an event happens, and we don't like to give an immediate response. You know what we like to do? We like to think about it first. What's wrong with that? You just gave me a proposal, you gave me an idea, something's happening. Why don't we think about it, and then I'll tell you what I think and what I feel, right? Chill out here, come on. If you force a melancholic, I know this from experience because I supervise a lot of clinicians. I don't know if you know this. The clinicians tend to be melancholic. You say, well, that's odd. You would think they would be sanguines, helping people be happier and go luckier, right?
Except
Cheer people
sanguines
up.
don't listen.
What's that?
Sanguines don't listen, so.
Yeah, well, that's right. You actually have to, you have to study to get these degrees. That's right. No, anyhow, no, it's actually the opposite. Melancholics like to go into therapy to help other people with their problems. So I'm a card-carrying one of those people. So anyhow, I have meetings with my melancholic staff, and I come up with a new idea. And I know just because it's a new idea, they won't like it. And so, but it's a good idea. I mean, every once in a while I have a good idea. So I want to sell my good idea to my melancholic staff. So I'll say, all right, I'm going to propose something, and I don't want you guys to react right away. They won't anyhow, or it'll be no. The immediate reaction, if you're forcing me to react, boom, okay. So I want you to think about it for a while. Think about it for a week or so. We have a meeting in a couple of weeks. We'll address this again. Then you can tell me what you think. And when you do that, 2 weeks later, they'll tell me what they think. And oftentimes it's very hopeful and let's go for it. They don't like to be compelled to decide right now.
Right.
So that's really important if you work with a melancholic, or like they come home, because melancholics are not as facile with transitions as the sanguines or the cholerics. So you come home, and like Lorraine's been with the kids all day, she's ready to talk, and I guess rock and roll with anything from a picnic to a movie to whatever, right? And the melancholic isn't in that rhythm. They want to think. So what we worked out in our marriage is like, just give me 20 minutes, babe. 20 minutes alone. They can hit me with whatever you got. I just need to recharge the battery a little bit. Need to reflect. Okay, I'm home now. Got to be available for the kids. Got to do this. And boom, I'm ready to go. That little pause sometimes is a real conflict in marriage. Why don't you respond like I do? Then now you know, at least with the temperament, you'll have a better idea. And after that 15, 20 minutes, you go in the living room, the kids climb all over, you're ready to go. You're ready to be the dad, you're ready to be the husband, you're ready to do it. Because the transitions are a little bit challenging. Now, if you are a phlegmatic, you want to know that about yourself. I had a great friend of mine who, when he drove home, if he wasn't ready to open that door and have the 7 kids attack him and love him, and have his wife goes, your turn, if he wasn't ready for that, he literally pulled over.
Yeah.
He pulled over, which in America could be an odd thing to do, just driving a car and pulling over and putting your head like this. But he would pull over, and he wanted to get that into that zone, to be ready to walk in and be a dad, ready for the kids, and ready to get, mwah, hey baby, give me that baby. Okay? But he needed about 15 minutes. That's so important. So I want to kind of highlight that as well, and also the idea of new things. Rarely force the melancholic, because what you're saying is go against your biggest strength, which is being thoughtful, and just do it, make a decision right now. Rather, give them a lead time. Like, maybe tomorrow we can talk about this next day. Give them a little space. Now, there's an interesting parable in the Gospel of Matthew about a couple of people where Christ kind of talks about what he likes and doesn't like, and one you can probably see is a melancholic, one's a sanguine. It's Matthew 21, 28 to 30. And since sometimes we don't know those off the top of our head, I'll read it to you. There was a man who had 2 sons. He went to the first one and said, son, go and work today in the vineyard. I will not, he replied. But later he changed his mind and went. Okay. Then the man went to his second son and told him the same thing. I will, sir, he said, but he did not go. Okay? So it's possible that the first one was a melancholic, immediately said no, but then said yes. That's very common, because the problem isn't the idea, the problem is the demanding an answer. That's the problem. On the other hand, sometimes sanguines can be because it's a great, wonderful world. I'm feeling great today. What do you want? I'll do it. What do you want? I'll do it. What do you want? I'll do it. All right. And then I'll charm my way out of it and do something else. So, all right, so both, you can see the assets of each one. But as you kind of grow up as a sanguine or grow up as a melancholy, you got to watch for that. You got to watch for that tendency either way. And Christ was pretty clear, by the way. He stuck his, he tended to do that. He didn't have bold statements. He is the Savior of the world. He said he preferred the first one, the no that turned to yes, than the yes that turned to no. So we have to be careful, or not careful, cognizant of this when we're working with different people. Ourselves, our tendency to say no or yes too quickly, that's a common problem. Almost everybody has to navigate that. When to say yes or no when it's prudent, right? When you've had time to make a good decision. Melancholics have time transitioning. It's funny, of all of our kids, our best student was a melancholic. She got good grades and is a real big shot now, doing fine. But she was always late for school. You know, just every little detail had to be just right before she could enter the world. You know what I mean? The car's honking, the bus is waiting, that kind of thing. So they sometimes have transition. Give me an example. She was at college, and she had a college job. I don't know what college jobs are like in Europe or Asia or whatever. America, there's kind of excuses to give the kids some money to justify the tremendous debt they're going to go into. So anyhow, so she had a job at a health club. A health club means the kids go in and work out, and they would have to show her card. So she's at the health club, and right there is the exercise bike, and there's the yoga pad, and there's the weights, and there's the class, and this and that. And she's sitting there, and she's going through that and studying a little bit and whatever. And now she comes home, and so she had started in August, comes home in March or April for Easter, and she tells us, you know, I've been have this job at the health club. You know, yeah, we know, it's great, that's great. Anytime a melancholic does anything, that's great. And she said, but you know what, I haven't been working out, but I'm thinking I might start working out. She's been working there 6 months. And I don't know if it's Laraine said it or if it was me. Lorraine's usually quicker to the draw. She goes, whoa, don't rush into that decision. And for us melancholics, sometimes the 0.999999 keeps going, and we don't leap to 1. Or do marriage counseling, you're talking to the melancholic dating. Yeah, but he's not perfect. I go, you know what? I haven't met him, but he's not perfect. You're right. There's nobody perfect. Come on. You can't be perfect. We can't wait for perfect. And sometimes melancholics are tempted to do that. They read the best poets. They listen to the best music. Unlike their sanguine friends who have thousands of Facebook friends, a melancholic has 2 or 3, and that's fine. I'm in a quality, not quantity. But sometimes the criteria can be too stiff, too harsh, too impossible to have happiness. So a constant thing helping your melancholic spouse and kids is it is a broken, sinful world we're navigating through here. With Christ, with love in our family, with us behind you, we can help you make decisions, help you take a chance. You got to take a chance if it's something really important and help them kind of get off the dime. What are the virtues for the melancholic to work on? Charity. Charity is a tough one sometimes. It's a challenge for them. Flexibility and gratitude. I can always tell when I'm working with a melancholic manager, somebody will have something good happen. And I'll say, hey, did you tell them how great that was? Well, why should I tell them? It's part of their job. I go, thank you, Mr. Melancholic. I have a book for you to read here. By your boss, you better read it. No, that's okay. No, because they just kind of feel like, why do I have to have all this extroverted pat on the back stuff and Euro attaboys? What's that all about? So if you're melancholic out there, just really know, they're 75% outnumbered on this thing. Life thrives on gratitude, on appreciation. We should really take nothing good for granted, right? So this is a test. This is something we always work with the melancholics. Go down the hall, ask everybody about their weekend. If you're not interested, pretend you're interested and see what happens. Really? Isn't that wasting time? No, it's not wasting time. It's connecting with your staff and developing a relationship which will allow them to perform better. Okay, got it. But it's interesting. They may not have known that. They may not have known that. And then that's kind of how we're on the other hand, credit to the melancholics. Truth, beauty, justice, they are always attuned to those things. It's beautiful. We need somebody who's like watching for those things all the time. And that sometimes brings a little melancholia because the world isn't quite that way. That's right. Like Christ said in the Gospel of John, there will be trouble. There will be trouble. It's all about overcoming the trouble. And that's a good gospel passage for us melancholics to reflect on. There will be trouble, but we have the gifts, the family, the strength, the God to overcome them. So that's our talk on the temperaments. We've talked about that they're a gift from God. And if you have one takeaway, that would be a great one. Because you start seeing things as a gift, even if they're not your gifts, the whole tone will change, particularly when that comes from a parent. You want to be a family of radical appreciation for what you got. And that doesn't prohibit you from growth and stuff to work on. I think I actually might want to say it gives you the leverage to start talking about working on weaknesses and trying to address issues. Because you start with acknowledging the strengths, like the saying went, oh, it's so great how good-hearted you are, how generous you are. I don't want you to stop that, but I do think you need to put a little more work on your homework. Otherwise, you're not going to have the dreams you're dreaming to have, that kind of thing. Anyhow, I'm going to throw a couple saints. I'm going to throw in 3 saints. It's actually easy to find melancholic saints in the Catholic Church. Padre Pio would be one. No fooling around with him. You could tell it like it is. I think actually St. Paul would be considered a choleric melancholic, kind of both. St. Benedict of the Cross, sometimes Edith Stein would be another one. I think St. Teresa of Calcutta, when we read her memoirs, it wasn't an easy day. It wasn't a walk in the park. That she had some real challenges that are great. So anyhow, we all have the gifts, as Pope Francis said. Let's develop our families to acknowledge those gifts. And out of that overt acknowledgement, we can work on the aspects where we all need to grow. Thank you very much for listening to our talk, everybody.
Well, thank you. Would you like to take some questions? You happy to take questions?
Do you want us to take questions?
Yes.
Oh, sure, yeah.
Happy to do that?
I'm phlegmatic, that's a good idea.
Yeah.
That's fine, yeah.
Sure. Okay, you'll have to look to see if there's any. I don't have my glasses on, so I can't see. There's somebody back there with a question. I see the hand over there. No?
Hi. Good morning. My name is Chidi. I'm from Nigeria.
Ooh.
I have 3 kids and counting. Yeah. Okay. So,
3 kids?
thank you. My question is on the secondary temperament. You said earlier that there's a primary temperament, and then there's a secondary temperament. So I wanted to understand the relation between the two of them and how to more or less help towards developing the secondary temperament, or how it complements, and what you could do about it to make it useful. Thank you.
Well,
Did you all hear that? So you have a primary temperament and a secondary temperament. Kind of how do those interact and how do they complement each other? Is that accurate? Okay, want to go?
yeah, well, I was going to say, I think once you know what they are, you kind of have a better picture of that, the temperament of that child or your spouse, whatever. But I don't think we are not saying that you should try to focus necessarily on building up one or the other, just kind of acknowledging the natural gifts that the temperament brings with both of your types of, whatever the two temperaments, the primary and the secondary. But really the key is to encourage growth in virtue, and growth in character. So this is going to be outside your temperament, actually. So at the end result is going to be a very different picture. And that's why often, when you look at saints or you look at people who are older, it's harder to tell the temperament because they have grown in virtue. Especially like with the saints, I think St. Ignatius of Loyola is a good example of a choleric. And he was like fighting when he was young, and I think he even got thrown in jail one time for public fighting. And but at the end of his life, they said he was the meekest and most humble of saints, but that's because he grew in virtue. He became Christ-like, which is kind of what we want. We want to encourage the growth in virtue. And even if you weren't like talking virtue talk, you would say, you want to gain skills. So Art, for example, he's a CEO. Well, if he was just like plodding along as a phlegmatic or a phlegmatic melancholic, he might never have never have taken on that job. But he grew in virtue. He acquired new skills and he worked on his education so that he could go beyond his temperament. Does that answer it? I don't know. What do you think?
Okay, answers it.
Is that kind of? Okay.
Yeah.
Yes.
Thank you. My name is Raymond from Kenya.
Ooh, Kenya.
I have
Where is he?
listened to, I've read quite a bit of what you've done over the years, and it's finally very good to meet you. Thank you very much.
Oh.
I just wanted to ask you to comment on these three, the relationship between temperament, character, and personality. If you could just make a comment. Thank you.
Your turn.
Comment on the character and temperament?
The relationship between temperament
character, and personality.
and personality. Oh, back to the slide. Here.
Temperament, character.
Here. Okay, so here. Where'd the slide go? Oh, there it is. So you want to talk about that, Art? Or,
go ahead, Lloyd.
Yeah, personality is the whole is much bigger than just temperament. So biology, so if you've heard the expression nature and nurture, so this is nature and that's nurture. And then your character, you build your character through I think it's going to happen through the environment, right? And your free choices, plus we're never determined by either the biology or our environment. So we're free to choose and to build our character to become good character, to have good character. Which,
Right, I mean, Laraine said it. So to become for your whole personality, and maybe we're equating personality and character, and that may not be totally right, but we're kind of like, who is my whole personality, the whole person that I am? How is that developed? And these are there's others as well. These are some of the qualities that you would want to look at. What we're saying, what happens, a lot of psychology, particularly, not so much of late, but it was only environment mattered.
right.
The psychology was going through about a 50-year period where the biology, except for the extreme biology, which was without freedom. So there was no sense of freedom or choice, didn't work. So it's a combination of factors that are out of your control, right? And then also how you respond to the factors in and out of your control, how you develop your freedom to become the kind of person you want to be. Now, if you get into arguments about personality and character, you're going to get into things like values. What are the values that you strive for that allow your personality and character to kind of develop? But we focus on the practical side on the virtues, on the acquisition of virtues. And again, in our model, the temperament model, Some virtues come naturally, some you have to go and get. And so when you get those together, integrate them, then that's your whole personality, that's your character, that's who you are as a person. Okay?
Okay.
Yes.
Oh, look at there's signs.
Hello.
My name.
How can a person have different? Can a person have a bit of every temperament, or are there only 2 temperaments that can be in a person, or how? Because I can imagine a person with 3 temperaments, but I don't know if it's possible. Maybe I have to go deeper into the person. I don't know if it's possible or not to have the combinations.
We think, a person, certainly in different phases of life, different situations, is going to be called to give different responses. Sometimes at work, you might have different responses there than you would have at home. But so the temperament doesn't limit your ability to respond. It just focuses on how you naturally respond. That's all. So for example, using Lorraine's example, or I'm the president and CEO of Catholic Charities. Just like my son when he became student body president, conflict every day. Now, I'm 67 years old. I've read a lot of books. I've got a lot of consultation. I read a lot of things about how to handle conflict. Because of my temperament, it's not natural for me. I have to study harder, listen to homilies differently, get coached up by my choleric wife sometimes, right? It doesn't come naturally to me, but I can get it. I can do it.
Right.
But the key thing about temperament is I have to take some responsibility to work harder at it in that way.
Right.
Whereas so that's the key. You want to become a full person.
Right, well-rounded.
Well-rounded. And we don't so much say you change your temperament. Okay, Bennett's a CEO. Does that mean he changed his temperament? No. We don't think so. We don't think so. It's just that I had to learn some new skills for the new stage of life that I was in. Just like all of you have had to learn new skills when you become a parent. You thought you had all the skills you needed, and then you discover you don't. So you have to keep growing. So it's really trying to have a model of growth and integration. Does that make sense?
And also, I think you can, if you're struggling to identify, well, first of all, you can take that quiz, temperamentquiz.com, but the one way to really tell what your basic temperament is in times of crisis, where do you go? Because it's like, I've been working on, for a really long time, trying not to be so argumentative. But it's funny because just the other day, and we've written all these books, and I'm this old, and I'm at work, and one of my coworkers pulled me aside and said, you need to stop arguing with your boss. You know, you need to like tone it down and stop escalating. And I'm like, oh, I was doing that? You know, but what happened was it was a huge conflict, and I immediately went to the thing that was easiest for me. It was like so easy for me to start arguing. And I just need to remember to stop doing that. And virtue is like, you know, I have to grow in virtue and learn when to stop arguing and when to let the other person have their say. But I think because it was a crisis situation, I went there first. So that's kind of your primary temperament. It's like, where do you go when you don't have time to think about it? And now a lot of people say, well, what was Christ's temperament? You know, it was like he was all 4 or something. You know, some people say, well, he was all the good parts of all of it. Well, and I don't know, but the point that that shows up in the scriptures is that he always he always chose the will of God. Like he always did the right thing. He always did the prudent thing. So sometimes he turned the other cheek, sometimes he turned over the tables. But he always did the right thing, which is what we are trying to do. And that's probably how our character grows, when we do the right thing. And we choose to do the right thing no matter what our temperament says to do.
Okay, there's time for just one last question. One last question.
Did that answer it? Was that okay? Okay. Was there...
It's the last question.
Last question.
Okay, Martin Papelik, Czech Republic. I would like to ask about the combinations in a marriage. For example, marriage of melancholic and a phlegmatic.
Well, the melancholic and the phlegmatic, they'll get around to getting married sometime.
Yeah, it might take a while.
You asked for some features of the melancholic phlegmatic marriage. It happens all the time. It's very common. Well, what you would have as a strength there would, of course, be the interior life. It would probably be a home where the focus would be on the home and how the home is. It's a double shot of introversion. So values would probably be very clear. and maybe also not immediate responses, maybe to anything actually. So there could be that temptation. I once had a couple of melancholics come into counseling because they never went on vacation. They just worked, and made a lot of money, but they just didn't take vacation. I go, oh, why is it you don't take vacation? Because, well, we never actually have everything right together and don't feel like it at the same time, so we don't take a vacation. So what I ended up helping them to do, so what they kind of lacked in their marriage was a kind of spontaneity, just to pull the trigger right away and just do something for the heck of it kind of thing. And so I said, why don't you come next week, bring your calendar, and we'll go over that. And of course, they each had calendars, which were guiding principles of their life, and they both had them on their lap. And we found a week in July or August or whatever where they both didn't have anything on there. I say, let's spontaneously right now schedule your vacation for that date. So they blocked it off. Did you block yours off? Okay. And that was it.
Yeah.
That was how I earned my $150 that day. But anyhow, But last thing on that, we have our sanguine daughter and our sanguine son sent us a text last night that our son-in-law and that last night that our 13-day-old baby went to his first beer party yesterday.
Yeah.
Sanguine mom, sanguine dad, beer party. He's not even 2 weeks old. So there you go. Okay, thank you. Thank you very much.
Thank you so much. Art&Laraine, thank you so much. So I imagine that just about everybody here now knows exactly what character type they have.